Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. It's going to be all about Heidi Grant Halvorson's 9 things successful people do differently. And we're really going to dig deep into like the psychology behind her strategies, not just kind of surface level, but how can you actually use these to make things happen in your own life?
It really is a fascinating book. She does such a great job of blending research and practical advice. So we'll be dissecting the science, exploring real-world examples, and most importantly, helping you apply these ideas.
Exactly. So let's just jump right in with the first habit. It's all about get specific. Halvorson really distinguishes between like those vague aspirations, lose weight versus concrete goals, like lose 5 pounds this month. Why is that so important?
Well, because the way our brains work is on discrepancies. Like the gap between where you are and where you want to be, specificity clarifies that gap. And that sort of sparks that internal need to bridge it.
So it's like your brain is sending you this like mission critical alert, attention required, mismatch detected. But Halverson takes it even further with something she calls mental contrasting.
Right. Instead of just visualizing success, you also really vividly imagine the obstacles. So let's say your goal is to get a promotion. You can picture the thrill of that new title, maybe a corner office, but then envision the tough competition. The extra hours you might need to put in to really prove yourself. Suddenly, that online course on leadership skills seems a lot less optional.
Wow. It's like you're pre-gaming for a challenge. You're mentally rehearsing for the hurdles, which makes you much more likely to actually clear them. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. It shifts you from just kind of wishful thinking to strategic action. And this brings us to habit number 2. Seize the moment to act on your goals. I mean, we're all busy, right? Opportunities slip by, and good intentions, well, those pave a lot of roads to nowhere.
So we need some sort of system to bridge that gap between intention and action.
Exactly. That's where if-then planning comes in. So instead of just vaguely hoping to exercise more, you decide exactly when and where you'll act. For instance, if it's Tuesday evening, then I'm hitting the gym after work. You're essentially programming your brain to capitalize on those moments.
She actually mentions a study in the book where people who used this if-then planning, they were 3 times more likely to stick with their workout routines. So that's pretty compelling evidence.
It is. It might seem surprising, but it really taps into our brain's natural contingency processing.
Right.
So by setting up these if-then links, we're making those actions almost automatic, even when we're distracted or feeling overwhelmed.
It's like we're hacking our brain's operating system, installing a shortcut that bypasses all those should I, shouldn't I internal debates, which often sabotage us.
Precisely. And that leads perfectly into the third strategy. Know exactly how far you have left to go. It's all about monitoring progress. And this is where things get a little counterintuitive.
Oh, so I would think celebrating milestones and recognizing what we've accomplished would actually be really motivating.
You'd think so. But focusing too much on how far you've come can actually make you complacent. Remember we talked about those discrepancies? Well, if you're constantly patting yourself on the back for progress made, you kind of lose sight of that remaining gap.
Ah, so it's like declaring victory after the first quarter of a game. You've still got a lot of playing left to do.
Exactly. Studies have shown that focusing on what's left to accomplish, that to go, rather than the to date, keeps that sense of urgency alive.
So is there a certain frequency we should aim for when it comes to checking in on our progress?
Well, the ideal frequency really varies depending on the goal's time frame and how complex it is. So short-term goals might require daily check-ins, while those long-term endeavors could be weekly or monthly assessments. And when you're in the early stages of learning, it's better to have less frequent self-evaluation, just to allow for that uninhibited exploration and skill development.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between staying informed about our progress without getting bogged down in all that self-critique.
Exactly. The key is to maintain that awareness of the remaining gap, so that motivating discrepancy stays front and center.
Okay, this is really making me rethink how I approach goal setting. It's not just about that initial motivation, it's about the strategies we use to sustain that drive throughout the journey. And speaking of mindsets, let's talk about being a realistic optimist.
Ah, yes, the power of positive thinking. But with a crucial caveat. It's not about blind faith or ignoring potential challenges. It's about acknowledging those challenges while maintaining confidence in your ability to overcome them.
So it's not just I will succeed, it's I will succeed because I'm prepared to put in the work
Yeah,
and navigate any obstacle.
precisely. There's a really important distinction between realistic and unrealistic optimism.
Can you maybe expand on that a little? What are the characteristics of a realistic optimist?
Well, realistic optimists, they balance their positive expectations with a clear-eyed view of reality. They acknowledge potential roadblocks, plan for contingencies, and see setbacks as opportunities to learn and adapt. This actually strengthens their confidence.
While unrealistic optimists might just coast on those positive vibes, expecting success to just magically appear without putting in the effort.
Right. And there's research that shows this unrealistic approach can actually hinder progress. For example, there was a weight loss study where women who believed losing weight would be easy, they actually lost less weight than those who anticipated it being challenging.
That's fascinating. So mentally preparing for a challenging journey can actually equip us to navigate it more effectively.
Absolutely. Realistic optimists are less likely to be thrown off course by setbacks because they've already mentally rehearsed those possibilities. Unrealistic optimists, on the other hand, they often get blindsided and give up much more easily when things don't go as smoothly as they hoped.
This is making me rethink my whole manifesting routine.
Okay,
Maybe I need to add some manifesting obstacles into the mix.
perhaps. But ultimately, it's about finding that balance between unwavering belief in your ability to succeed and a clear-headed assessment of the potential challenges along the way.
This brings us to a principle that really resonates with me. Focus on getting better rather than being good. It's so easy to get caught up improving ourselves, focusing on our existing skills. But what about embracing that potential for growth?
That's the key distinction Halvorson makes. She contrasts be good goals, which are all about showcasing your current ability, with get better goals, which emphasize that continuous learning and development.
And I imagine those different goal orientations lead to very different outcomes.
Absolutely. Be good individuals. They tend to crumble under pressure when things get difficult because they're afraid that their inherent abilities are being questioned. However, get better folks, they embrace those challenges as opportunities for growth. Their motivation comes from the prospect of expanding their skills and knowledge.
Sounds a lot like the growth mindset concept.
Precisely. And there's a ton of research to back it up. For instance, one study found that when tasks became more demanding, individuals with that be good orientation, their performance actually declined, while those focused on getting better, they maintained their level of performance.
So it's not just about being resilient in the face of difficulty. It's about using those challenges as fuel for continued development.
Exactly. And there's more. A get better mindset actually makes you enjoy the process itself. You're not constantly trying to validate your worth. Instead, you're relishing that journey of learning and mastery, which can be incredibly energizing.
So it's not just about pushing through fatigue. It's about finding a source of energy within the pursuit of progress itself.
Leading to even better performance, not just in the current endeavor, but in future ones as well. It's this self-perpetuating cycle of growth and achievement.
This is so insightful. It makes me realize how much my fear of making mistakes might be holding me back.
That's very common. But it's important to remember that errors are inevitable, especially when you're venturing into uncharted territory. Allowing yourself to stumble can actually liberate you to achieve remarkable things.
And this leads perfectly into the next principle. Have grit.
Grit, that unwavering persistence and commitment to those long-term goals. It's something you see in so many highly accomplished individuals. But what determines a person's level of grit? Is it something you're born with, or can it be developed?
Right. Is it nature or nurture?
This is where Carol Dweck's research on mindsets comes in. She distinguishes between entity and incremental beliefs about ability.
Okay, can you break those down for our listeners? What exactly do those terms mean?
So people with an entity mindset, they see their abilities as fixed, like they have a set amount of intelligence or talent, and when they face setbacks, they tend to attribute it to this inherent limitation, and they give up easily.
It's like saying, I'm just not a math person, and giving up before they even try.
Exactly, and that can be so limiting. Now, on the other hand, people with an incremental mindset, they believe that abilities can be developed through effort and experience. They see setbacks as opportunities to learn, adapt, and try harder.
So it's not just about raw talent. It's about that willingness to put in the work and embrace that path of continuous growth.
Absolutely. And the research shows that this gritty mindset is linked to much greater achievement in the long run. But there's actually one finding that's kind of unsettling. For people with that entity mindset, progress can actually make them anxious.
Really? Why would that?
Because it challenges their whole belief system. If they're operating on this idea of fixed ability, then seeing themselves improve makes them confront the limits of that belief.
It's like their inner voice is screaming, wait a minute, this shouldn't be happening. My whole worldview is crumbling.
Exactly. And that anxiety can actually sabotage their future performance, make them more likely to revert back to old patterns.
I've experienced this myself. Those times when I've exceeded my own expectations in areas where I thought it was just bad. Instead of celebrating, I felt this weird sense of, Wait, this must be a fluke. There's no way I'm actually good at this.
That's a perfect example of how an entity mindset can hold us back. We're almost subconsciously undermining our own success.
So how do we break free from that limiting belief system? How can we cultivate that more empowering incremental perspective?
It takes a conscious effort to challenge those entity thoughts when they pop up. Remind yourself that you can improve, that your abilities aren't set in stone. Embrace the growth mindset, and your grit will naturally follow.
This is powerful. It really highlights how much our self-perceptions shape our potential. And speaking of pushing our limits, let's move on to building your willpower muscle.
Willpower. It's often seen as this mysterious force, but it's actually more tangible than we think. Think of it like a muscle that gets depleted with use, but can also be strengthened over time.
So just like our physical muscles need rest after a workout, our willpower needs time to recharge.
Exactly. We tend to overestimate our willpower reserves, which leads us to overexert ourselves and eventually burn out.
It's like trying to run a marathon without training. You might start strong, but hitting the wall is almost inevitable.
Yes. And just like physical fatigue can make it hard to resist that extra slice of cake,
Yeah.
willpower depletion makes us more susceptible to all kinds of temptations.
So how do we restore those depleted willpower reserves? What strategies can we use to replenish our self-control?
Well, rest is crucial, of course. But even when we can't fully recharge, there are things that can give us a willpower boost. Studies show that even just thinking about people who are known for their self-discipline can have a positive effect. It's like that willpower rubs off on you.
That's incredible. Are you saying that if I just picture my super disciplined friend, it'll give me the willpower to resist those cookies?
Maybe not that directly, but research does show a real effect. Another easy fix is doing things that improve your mood.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
So listening to my favorite music or watching a funny video can actually boost my willpower.
Yes, positive emotions can help replenish your self-control when you're feeling depleted. But it's not just about quick fixes. Remember, willpower is a muscle, and it can be strengthened over time.
Okay, so how do we work out our willpower? What kind of exercises can we do to build up our self-discipline?
It's about consistently challenging yourself to do things that require self-control, even when you don't feel like it. Could be as simple as resisting that extra treat, sticking to your budget, or tackling a task you've been putting off.
So even those seemingly small acts of self-discipline can add up over time.
Absolutely. It's like building up those mental muscles, training your brain to resist those impulses, and stay focused on your goals. And like physical exercise, the more consistent you are, the stronger you'll become.
That's encouraging. It means that even if I struggle with willpower now, I can train myself to be more disciplined over time.
Exactly. It's not some fixed character flaw. It's a skill that can be developed. The more you practice, the better you'll get at navigating those inevitable temptations.
This is so empowering. It changes my whole perspective. Instead of feeling like a victim of my impulses, I see that I have the power to shape my own self-control.
That's the key. And it leads perfectly into Halvorson's next principle: don't tempt fate.
Even when we do have strong willpower, it's important to recognize its limits.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We shouldn't put ourselves in situations where we're likely to be overwhelmed. Even with a strong willpower muscle, we all have our breaking points.
So it's about being aware of those times when our willpower is low, like after a long day at work or when we're tired or stressed.
Exactly. It's like knowing that if you walk past that bakery when you're starving, you're almost guaranteed to buy a pastry, no matter how strong your willpower usually is.
It's not about a lack of willpower. It's about recognizing that certain situations make us more vulnerable.
Exactly. And it also means being kind to ourselves, recognizing that we're human and we're not always going to make perfect choices.
That's a great reminder that self-compassion is just as important as self-discipline. We can't hold ourselves to this unrealistic standard of being immune to temptation. It's about finding that balance between pushing ourselves and honoring our limitations.
Exactly. It's about a sustainable approach to reaching our goals, one that acknowledges both our strengths and weaknesses and uses them strategically.
This really changes my whole view of willpower. It's not about striving for perfection. It's about using smart strategies to manage the complexities of self-control.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding ourselves and our limits and creating an environment that sets us up for success.
That gives us a lot to think about. It's not just about willpower as an abstract concept. It's about understanding the practical things we can do to support it in our daily lives.
And as we move on to the final principle, we'll see how framing our goals in a positive and action-oriented way can make us even more likely to achieve them.
Which brings us to Halvorson's ninth and final principle. Focus on what you will do, not what you won't do. I'm really curious to hear more about this seemingly counterintuitive approach.
This one actually builds on the last principle. It's about shifting our focus from avoidance to attainment.
It's kind of like that classic advice to replace a bad habit with a good one. Instead of just trying to quit smoking, you might focus on taking up running or spending more time with loved ones.
Precisely. You fill the void with positive action instead of just suppressing the negative one. And research shows this approach is much more effective. Remember we talked about how negation thinking can actually reinforce those unwanted thoughts.
Oh, right. Like the whole don't think about a pink elephant thing. The harder you try to suppress it, the more it lingers.
And the same is for behaviors. By fixating on what we won't do, we actually give those negative actions more mental energy, which makes them more likely to happen.
So instead of saying, I won't eat any more junk food, the focus becomes, if I get a craving for sweets, I'll grab a piece of fruit.
Exactly. It's about those if-then strategies again, replacing the bad with the good.
And the research bears this out. Negation plans, those focused on not doing something, were consistently the least effective.
It's a powerful reminder that our brains don't always work the way we expect them to. By shifting our attention to what we will do, we create a much more positive and proactive approach to achieving our goals.
This is really insightful. It
Yeah.
makes me want to reframe how I think about my own goals. Instead of dwelling on what I want to eliminate, I'm going to start by focusing on what I want to create.
That's a great takeaway. As we wrap up our exploration of Halvorson's 9 principles, it's clear that success isn't just about some innate talent or ability. It's about having the right mindset and using the right strategies.
These 9 principles have definitely given me a whole new perspective on achievement. It's not about being perfect. It's about strategically using the psychology of success to our advantage.
And it's empowering to realize that we have more control over our success than we often think. These 9 principles provide a roadmap, a framework for getting where we want to go.
It's like Halvorson is handing us the keys to the Success Mobile. Our job is to learn how to drive it. And speaking of taking action, let's recap those 9 habits of successful individuals, so our listener walks away with some clear takeaways.
Sounds good. Let's distill it into a 10-point summary for our listener. First up, set specific goals. That clarity creates the mental discrepancy, that gap between where you are and where you want to be, which fuels motivation.
Number 2, use if-then planning to seize opportunities. It's like programming your mind to recognize and act on those moments that align with your goals.
3, regularly monitor your progress, but focus on what's left to do, not what you've already done. This keeps that sense of urgency alive and prevents you from celebrating too early.
4, be a realistic optimist. Believe in your ability to succeed, but also acknowledge the potential challenges and make plans to overcome them. That preparation actually boosts your confidence.
5, adopt a get-better mindset. Embrace continuous learning and development. This allows you to see challenges as opportunities rather than threats to your ego.
6, cultivate grit by believing in your ability to improve. This is where that growth mindset really comes into play, fueling your persistence and commitment to those long-term aspirations.
7, strengthen your willpower muscle through regular practice. Remember, self-control is a skill you can develop, not a fixed personality trait.
8, don't tempt fate when willpower is low. Be smart about those high-risk situations and make choices that support your goals, especially when you're feeling depleted.
9, focus on what you will do, not what you won't do. Create those if-then strategies that replace negative behaviors with positive ones. Fill the void. Don't just try to suppress the bad habit.
And 10, bonus reminder, success is about strategy and action, not just talent. Halvorson's research shows that it's the people who consistently apply these principles who achieve extraordinary things.
This deep dive has been all about uncovering not just the what of success, but also the why behind it. Hopefully it's given you, our listener, the insights and tools to unlock your own potential.
I know I've learned a lot today,
Yeah.
and I hope you have too. Remember, success isn't about achieving perfection. It's about making those small, consistent choices that add up to extraordinary results.
Maybe one final thought for you to ponder. What are your beliefs about your own abilities? Are they fixed or are they malleable? Thinking about this can be the first step toward unlocking even greater success.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
It's amazing how these little tweaks to our thinking can lead to such big changes in our actions and results. These 9 principles are really like a blueprint for anyone who wants to up their game.
And it's not about some massive life overhaul, right? It's about those intentional choices we make every day, aligning our actions with these evidence-backed strategies. I love that, intentional choices, not overwhelming makeovers. Well, I'm feeling super inspired to put these principles into practice.
Me too. Hopefully our listener is feeling the same, ready to unlock their own potential.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today on this deep dive into Heidi Grant Halvorson's incredible work. We'll catch you next time for another insightful exploration.